if you fail at conflict, I believe your business will fail in terms of like you will not grow. You could do a business as a solopreneur, maybe have one person, but if you cannot hit these conflict points and have conflict, like I believe that your business will fail. If you're too toxic, people will leave. And if you don't address the conflict, you will not grow. Your people will not grow.
On the show, we're going to sit down and talk about the metamorphosis that happens when you become a leader.
We'll share our biggest wins and our losses and interview other leaders to find out how they stay in charge without losing their minds.
I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Zach. Welcome to the Who's in Charge podcast. All right, so today I want to get into it. I want to get into some conflict with you, or at least how we should.
With me?
With you. Let's talk about conflict. I'm sure there'll be some conflict along the way as we talk about how you deal with disagreements in relationships and in business, and how you do this in such high stakes environments. I know it's something you're passionate about.
Is that because I don't shy away from conflict?
Actually, I mean, I do think, I joke around about it, but I do think that you're very good at conflict. And it's interesting because we talk about how to operate at a business level, but honestly, it's across all relationships, and it's really kind of brought in from childhood, right? Like how you were brought up and raised as a childhood is actually going to affect how you perform in the business world. And as you become a leader, it becomes critically important. I mean, this is one of the most important things I think about probably a business. You have to have an idea and you have to have a plan, but to actually execute it and get it done, if you're not going to be a solopreneur, you have to work with other people. And therefore, you have to be able to operate in conflict, and you set the culture. And setting the culture of we're just going to, sweep things under the rug and never talk about them and see how that goes. Or we're going to have explosive conflict where everybody's afraid, and figuring out somewhere between those two to actually be successful. And I think you have positively influenced me in the idea of how to have good conflict. I think we're good arguers. I think we're good conflictors.
I'm excited to dig into this because I think that how people respond to conflict is actually really interesting. And it does, I think, stem from how conflict happened in your household. And I learned a lot about conflict resolution and like fair fighting and how to have conflict end in a positive result, basically from marriage, right? Like you want to talk about going through life together with somebody and like having shit come up. Like there's a lot of conflict either with each other or with just managing life or, managing stress. And of course that completely translates over to business. And I think a very strong indicator of a fantastic leader is somebody who can handle that and turn conflict and friction or tension into a really, really positive thing. Because in the end, we need that. You need that catalyst to create something wonderful. So maybe I'll start with my experience with conflict and kind of maybe shape a little bit of like why I have the opinions that I have. But I have a lot of examples of like not great conflict that I think were probably the biggest ways that I learned. So I'm half Italian, half Norwegian. My mom born and raised in Italy and then later moved to Canada, and my dad born and raised in Norway and came to the US for college. And I like to say that I have like the Viking and the Italian rage. I don't know. Like there's some passion here. There's some passion.
There's passion.
Yeah. And the way my Italian family dealt with conflict was really loud. And it was funny. I never really realized how different it was or whatever until you came into the picture and you're like, whoa, this is a scary level of conflict. And like, so
I was taken back. I was like, for sure. I was like, whoa.
We get a little passionate. But I think what's interesting, so, okay, I'll give an example. When my mom and I would get into a disagreement, like it was always very loud, right? And like she would hold her ground and I would hold my ground. And there would be like this like crescendo of like points being made, and then everything would be just fine. But we went through the full cycle of conflict where like it was building. There's like some sort of like pinnacle moment or explosion, or even understanding. And maybe that's a better way to describe it, because I don't really feel like understanding was really ever reached until it got to like a heightened level. And then everything kind of cooled back down and everything was okay again. So I knew in trying to get through to my mom, if her and I were in an argument, that I had to ride that whole wave and then everything would be fine. So I was coming into the conflict knowing that it would be like, I'm safe and it would be safe in the end, and that she could tolerate my reaction, and then she knew that I could tolerate her reaction. And even though it was going to be loud and whatever, in the end, it would be okay. Like, that's how we were going to come to resolution. So here comes that.
I did not feel safe. I will tell you, I did not feel safe here.
So maybe from your perspective, how did you see conflict, and like maybe like pair that with coming into that, seeing that situation for the first time?
You know, I think we've told this story, well, not here, but I've told you the story as well. Like, holidays in my family, you know, would get a little bit chaotic, and I love all my family. So if you're listening to this, it's all from love, but I think we're incredibly stubborn and don't have a great history in getting over things. So this is the thing with getting through conflict. Like you said, you know that you've done this enough times with your mom that you've gotten to the other side and it's been okay. But if in your background you have a history of having those type of relationships and then having it not be okay, have a fight happen and then people don't talk for a year, they don't talk for 3 years, or they don't talk, like, oh, I have so many of these stories. I got my grandfather into a heap of crap because I was throwing rocks as a kid at some sign. We call it the Sisu sign. I don't even know what it stood for. And that owner came out and screamed at us kids, rightfully so. I'm like destroying his beautifully wood sign with rocks. And my grandfather was pissed off, got in a fight with him. I don't think they ever talked again. For the rest of their lives, I don't think they ever talked. Or, you know, the story of, you know, people wrestling in the living room, and like literally the other story I love is holding somebody's hair in their hands with another fist up, going like, if you don't let go of my hair, I'm going to punch you in your face. So like having those history of conflicts, I walked into your household of like screaming beyond any of those levels and like, what the hell is going to happen? And the resolution I was afraid of. Good.
Well, I think it's because you didn't get to a point of resolution often, or like you said, like so many years passed that like it never really was discussed, right? It's just like everyone just finally got over it. Like, so coming into our relationship, Zach kind of conflict avoidant, and I'm pro conflict.
Very pro.
You know, and I think it's because we got to the resolution part, and I became comfortable with the like what it took to get to the resolution part. And with that being said, one of the things that came with a very emotionally fueled conflict session is people said stuff that they couldn't take back, right? So like it wasn't always very healthy, like of course, right? Just like anything. When you get into really heated discussions and arguments, like the biggest risk is you say something you can't take back to somebody that you really love. And I definitely had many examples of that throughout my whole life, of not just my family, but with friends or whatever. And so I think what I got from the end of it was you have to be extremely honest and willing to go through the roller coaster of having the conflict, having the tension, saying the things you need to say, and then coming to resolution together without destroying the relationship, like without going for the jugular, you know, like
right.
You never go for the jugular in conflict. You always go for the resolution. So, and I had to learn too how to navigate that with my family, because there's definitely times that they just went for the jugular, or I just went for the jugular. And so I had to learn that. And I think a lot of that came from learning how to fight with you, you know, and not to say that there's lots of them, but there's plenty. And I think, that's where the conflict management that you learn in relationships becomes extremely relevant in your professional relationships too, especially if you're in a leadership position, because it's on you to say the truth. Because if you don't say the thing that you believe, or if you don't stand up for the initiative that you're trying to get done, or if you see risk and people aren't on the same page as you, like, you better be saying something, but you have to say it in a way that's productive. So like the only thing you really have to draw from is all the experience that you have in your personal life in order to start somewhere from your professional life. And then, of course, iterate from there on a professional level. I hope you're not having personal type relationship fights in the professional setting, but if you know what I mean, like the ability to say, to be kind and clear sometimes means saying something that is hurtful to hear on the other end. Like no one wants to receive bad news or to give bad news, but you have to say it in order to get to the resolution.
Yeah. And I mean, the reality is we're probably not two totally different people at work and at home, right? Like there's so much bleed over. Integrity is a big one of my core values. Like if you're being true to who you are, then it should show up, everywhere. And I think business is relationships, and relationships are everywhere and everything. So it's how you're going to do one is probably how you're going to roll into the other. Now there's some caveats to that, and you're probably a whole lot more loose with your personal relationships, but there's going to be some bleed over. And so, I think managing conflict, you've got to have some sort of guardrails to the idea of we're not a conflict avoidant, right? Conflict avoidant is one of the detriments to business. It may make today better, but it is going to make tomorrow worse and probably next year non-existent. But then also making sure that you keep some sort of guidelines on there to not go off the rails the other way and have toxic conflict. And so that, statement that clarity is kindness, I have to remind myself of that because I tend to be conflict avoidant, right? And if my tendency, know yourself, if your tendency is to be conflict avoidant, then I have to remind myself like, no, I want to be kind. Right? I think words matter and definitions matter. And so when you say that clarity is kindness and you want to be a kind person, then you're going to hold more true to that. Like, all right, I'm a kind individual. I need to be more clear with what my expectations are. And I think I've learned it with our relationship. And then also, in through business, I think it was Jocko that had that example of many of us walk around with conflict pent up and we're avoiding the conflict. We're not saying anything. And then all of a sudden we can't take it. We can't tolerate it anymore. And then I unleash every element of conflict and how pissed off I am at you or the business or whatever. And he's like, that's like a dog just walking by somebody and randomly biting somebody. Like, what would you do with that dog? Like if you just had a dog that walked in the park, was totally calm and cool, and then just bit somebody every, once a week, you'd put that dog down. And I feel like that's kind of who I used to be. I used to let things bottle up. And now to avoid somebody putting me down like a rabid dog and to be a better leader, I want to make sure that I'm forcing myself to, like you said, be more clear, be more kind.
I think the first step in handling conflict well is seeking inward as to what your natural reaction to conflict is, identifying that. Like, am I comfortable with conflict? Am I conflict avoidant? Am I too passionately, involved in conflict? Do I lose my temper when I get upset? Essentially, where do you fall? And leadership in general, I think, is a big exercise in humility and self-awareness. And so when we're talking about conflict in the workplace, I think we have to first examine how we handle conflict in our personal life, in order to make it into something productive professionally and honestly, personally too. I think the idea is to have productive conflict so that we can actually all live together in harmony. But you said something that I want to go into too, and that is that it's kind to be clear. And as a leader, I think that's where there's a kind of this other side of the challenge, and that is having clarity yourself on what is important and what it's going to take to get a goal done. So you have a goal, and let's just say it's a number. Maybe it's the number of deals that you want to do a year or whatever. You can't just stop there and say, I want to do 100 deals this year and then just be mad that we don't hit that goal. You as a leader, I think, have to establish what excellence looks like in order to get that goal, and then clearly communicate it to your team and show them, this is the framework of how we're going to be successful, right? We've talked about goal setting and revenue ceilings and all this stuff. But to your point at the very beginning is what happens when you get punched in the face and it doesn't go well, or somebody drops the ball. It's not kind to the rest of the people on your team if you allow somebody to continually drop the ball without them potentially even knowing how to fix it. So you have to be able to enter into this conflict type scenario where you're like, hey, I saw you drop the ball. What happened there? And creating that, you have to walk into that kind of tension type thing and be like, that wasn't okay that happened. And I can't allow you to keep doing this. Like, I'm going to be here to partner with you, and we're going to figure out a way to get to resolution. And I think creating that thread to resolution, but first I've got to call it out and be like, you dropped that ball. Why? And that's not being mean. That's being kind and helping somebody get to the point of resolution and success.
Yeah, if you want to be a good leader, what are we here for? It's to help the best version of that person come out. And it can't come out if they don't see it or if they don't see the steps to it. So it's funny because you mentioned the idea, like, we're all somewhere different on the spectrum. And that's what's interesting about this platform, to be like, all right, there's somebody out there that needs to like chill their crap out. You don't have to call out everything and blow up. And there's somebody else that's listening to this. It's like, you got to get off your butt and you actually have to call something out. So we all have to know ourselves first to be like, what is my natural tendency to then come through there? And you're 100% right. Like, it's not kind to the rest of the team that's dependent on everyone else doing their job. And it's not kind to the individual who's now entrusting you to help them become the best version of themselves. And so I think framing it that way for me is, like I said, the definition is so important. Like, it becomes more obvious that, like, no, I need to go ahead and say that. It's, maybe it's uncomfortable. And I've actually had to have conversations with people about this because I wasn't always this way, right? I was a lot more conflict avoidant. And I've had conversations with people on the team of like, I know this is uncomfortable. Like, how they're responding to me right now, I know that you're very uncomfortable, but we have to have this relationship. If this is not the type of relationship that you want, then this is probably not the right position for you, because I want the best for you. I want the best for the team. And we're not going to get there if I can't have this type of conversation. And check yourself, because we all think we do it right. We all think we're doing well. Like, okay, if somebody's responding negatively to something, do take a step back and be like, did I do this in the right way at the right time? Because I'm not perfect with it. I had something yesterday. I'm like, I'm going to do this. And then I'm like, nope, I should do it a different way. And I'm like, nope, I'm doing it anyways. Click send. And so send somebody some negative feedback of what they need to work on and do better on via essentially a Skype message, right? Like, not the best leadership moment at that moment, but like, in a way, we all make decisions emotionally and justify them logically. It was more important for me at that time that I got it out and got it said to be kind, that like, this does need improvement. There's probably a better way that I could do it, but it's better for me to err on that side, especially as a conflict avoidant person, than sweep it under the rug and be like, I missed the opportunity for improvement.
I think that's an interesting call out, because you may perceive this to be not the right way to communicate, but knowing that you tend to be avoidant, you doing something that you feel like is maybe not the ideal way to communicate because you're trying to lessen the impact, because you're naturally conflict avoidant, you just doing that message, I bet you was received as like neutral on the scale of 1 to 5, right? Like, that wasn't the wrong thing to do, but you potentially perceived it as like, this is not the most ideal way to soften, to have this land softly. And, and I think the other thing could potentially be true too. Like, the person that tends to be, to lose their temper needs to take a space in between sending that message, right? So I think that's why it's important to come back to like what your natural tendency is, so that you can communicate conflict in a way that will be received the best, which is what we all want. We all want it to be towards resolution. Yeah.
The idea of like relationships as a bank. I mean, you've probably heard this before, right? Like, your relationships with other people are similar to a bank. You can make deposits and withdrawals. And so in a way, the way that I see this, right, is me sending this message is kind of almost like a withdrawal. It's like not the best way to be able to handle it. But what is my bank account with that person? Have I been making deposits? Have I been giving moments of encouragement, moments of positivity, doing my one-on-one time? Like, and the more of those deposits you make into people throughout the day, throughout the week, allows you to get away with more of those withdrawals of like, all right, maybe we could have a meeting on this, but I'm going to send this one quick message. It might hit you as a little bit of a jab, but we have many deposits that are in that bank. And so as you think about that throughout the week, pay attention to, am I making more deposits than I am withdrawals on people? I think, especially as your business gets busier and you're wearing more and more hats, because the way that this comes out for me is just the idea of time. Like, I just don't have time to make it now. And if I don't do it now, then is it going to be later today? Or then it's going to be tomorrow, probably be next week. And then I'm like, all right, then you missed your opportunity.
Yeah.
So the busier you get, the more withdrawals you're going to wind up making. We get to the point in the business where like, that was my relationship with the PMs and the contractors, right? Like, I don't have time to pat you on the butt all the time. It's like, I would come through and it was be so many more withdrawals for them in terms of like this, and this all need to get fixed. Like, what the hell? So I did 100 things right, but I just was there to like pick out the 5 things that needed to be fixed before we could list the house and move on.
I love that you said this, because this is my favorite part. And this what I think is really, really important for just leadership development in general. Maybe this is for somebody here that's kind of brand new into a leadership position. I think there's a misnomer that if you're a leader, you need to point out the bad stuff and you need to coach the stuff, right? Like, no, move your elbow down, move your elbow up, change your hand position on the ball, whatever it is. Like, you're giving this feedback, which is negative. Like, I'm going to show you all the things that you're doing incorrectly and all the things that you can improve. That's actually, it's the opposite. You're speaking to this like piggy bank that you have with somebody. Your most important thing that you can do as a leader is show the person that you're coaching where they're doing really well. Yeah. In fact, most people have no idea. Your special trait as a leader is being like, I see this. This is where you shine. I want you to lean into this area. We're like, oh, I heard you say this. I want you to go deeper with that. Like, this was brilliant. Do this, right? Keep doing that. People have a really hard time even knowing what they're good at. Like, the level of need that people have to be told what they're really good at is astronomically more than what they need to get better at. I think that has been the most impactful way to influence somebody that I'm trying to lead or coach through something is be like, we're clearing out all this and like, this is it. This is what you're so good at. Like, you crush this. Let's do more of that. And then, like you said, because there's so much pulling out of the good and like you're developing a relationship with somebody and they're like, oh, they see me. There's a trust being built here, right? Like, I understand you. Maybe there's even an element of like fun and working together because like it's great. That feels good to be like, no, I'm good at this. When the time comes that you have to say the negative thing, I think that you earn the resolution in a way that you would not have if you're only coming at it with the negative. Now, yeah. This also means that the right person has to be in the right seat. And there's lots of things that come to this because clearly, like, somebody who's meant to be an accountant is not going to be a good salesperson. And it's going to be very difficult to find where that accountant is being a really great salesperson, just as a dichotomy, right? Like, you can't just coach up and find excellence in anybody in any role at any time. Like, there's a lot that comes to this, but, creating improvement and creating a high performer or making a high performer better, it comes from that positivity way more than it comes from like the nitpicking negative. Yeah. I think that's all very good. Just to make the point, like, if you fail at conflict, I believe your business will fail in terms of like, you will not grow. You could do a business as a solopreneur, maybe have one person, but if you cannot hit these conflict points and have conflict, I believe that your business will fail. If you're too toxic, people will leave. And if you don't address the conflict, you will not grow. Your people will not grow. And so getting into I'm thinking right now, like Patrick Lencioni's dysfunction of a team, right? Like absence of conflict, I think is like number 2 on there. But going one layer deep on there is trust. You just talked about the idea of trust and like creating a safe zone. So I think hopefully we made the point that like you can't avoid conflict, right? But now how do we have good conflict? And it starts with trust and creating a safe zone. I remember one time for us, we were sitting in a leadership meeting and we had, a leader that was sitting at the table and there was a little bit of disagreement that was going on. And you could just tell, it was like, she went to say something. And then she didn't. Nothing came out. I'm like, what is that? What are you doing? And she's like, I can't say it. You're the boss. I'm like, whoa. That's not the culture. That's not the zone. Right now, I'm not. And at that point, I was sitting in 2 different roles. I'm not even like sitting there as a CEO. I'm sitting there as like the acquisitions manager. Like, you are now having a conflict with the acquisitions manager. It is not the CEO of the company. What do you need to say? You got something? Let's bring it out. And I think it's important, to set that,
tone for the company. And as I think about it, so going to extreme ownership, right? Like, I have to make sure that I'm setting that, but then looking at why she felt like that. And it was probably, the company was small at that point, and most conflict was probably avoided unless it was with you and me. And the way that you and I fight, I picked up some tips from you and your mom, and I think you and I would have some very heated conversations because we have long-standing relationship. I've got a big relationship bank. I've put a lot of deposits into our relationship, so like we can have that. And I think, them probably seeing in the moment, like, that's how conflict is. Like, I got to get up there. Like, I'm not going there. And so I had to make sure that, like, A, I created that safe zone, and B, have different conflict, and with you maybe as the example of, like, all right, bringing it down. Like, maybe I don't argue with you like we argue at home, in the public forum, to make it,
we've had to
safe
learn
for
that
others.
lesson. We've had to learn that lesson when we first started working together, for sure. I think the safety of somebody to disagree with you as the leader or the boss or the CEO or whatever is a really important point to make. That it should be okay for people to disagree with you. It should be okay for people to give you a different opinion, and you cannot shut them down. Like, there has to be, it's a dialogue. It's not a monologue. And you will not have a caliber team that you want if you can't handle that dialogue as the CEO.
Yeah.
You're not going to be the person on the pedestal just shouting down orders. You're going to be the person who's working with the leadership team, and working with somebody, just like being married to somebody, means that you have different perspectives and different opinions, and together the united opinion and the united perspective is what gets to the right answer in the end. So that means that you can throw out an idea or an opinion, and most of the time somebody's not going to agree with you. And the result is so much better when you can banter that back and forth. But that means that somebody has to feel safe enough to do that, and without you freaking out.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everybody and that you have to go with their things, but how you respond, how you listen. Like, first of all, do you listen to the point where, like, I feel like I was heard? Because if you're not listening to the point where I feel heard, you're distracted, you're interrupting, you're doing any of these terrible communication tactics, I'm probably never bringing anything to you again. Like, what's the point? I'm not even heard. And then how you shoot that down can also be very, telling as to whether they're ever going to raise another issue. And again, if you don't want to constantly be doing everything and be the smartest person in the room, like, you have to create these moments where they can bring things to you. And then again, depending on the decision, big decision. Remember Claire had that big deal, little deal, you know, like, am I going to die on this hill and not going to die on this hill? Are we going to die if we take this other option? And it's been said 100 times for leadership. Like, if somebody else is going to be responsible for the outcome of that, and their idea gets you 70% of the way there, their 70% plan implemented at 100% because it was theirs, versus 20% implementation on your 100% plan is going to work, 100 times better. And actually, if there was more conflict around it, they're probably going to give 110% into their damn idea, because, like, shoot, he didn't want to do it this way.
Yeah.
I really better make sure this succeeds.
Are you speaking from experience there with me? But yeah, and I think so. Maybe this is fresh on my mind because I'm sitting right now in the middle of the week. It's a Wednesday, and this whole week is about quarterly planning with the Left Main team. And so what this means is we're talking about results, like what happened last quarter, what went well, what didn't go well, and taking that and, like, transcribing it into, like, okay, what are we going to do this quarter? Making sure that we're very, like, locked in on our quarterly rocks and our goals. And that's a big part of that. And how we start that planning is reflection. And it's difficult to reflect on, like, what went wrong, right? Because we all want to sit here and celebrate, but plenty goes wrong that we've got to fix, right? And we had this discussion, and this comes up on a quarterly basis, is how we are doing as a leader with our team. How is conflict in our team? How is that management going? Like, we kind of all reflect on that as a leader ourselves. And, like, so I think talking about conflict on a regular basis is good, because it kind of normalizes the fact that it's happening and how we handle it. And I was just talking to one of our team members today, and he was saying, what I've learned over the last few years is that it's more important on how well I can work with somebody than how well they work with me. And it's kind of this dichotomy of like, I have to adjust my style for every team member on my team, not demand them to adjust just to me. Like the leader is the one that actually is working for the team, right? Like, what are your obstacles? How do we remove them? And, enabling your team. And I think this is an important thing to point out because everybody handles conflict differently between you and me, naturally. And then everybody on your team handles conflict differently. So we have to have this awareness of how to have conversations with people. And it's more important that they understand you than the other way around, right? You don't want to force your will on everybody. And that is extremely, extremely challenging, to adjust like that. But I think it's important from the relationship and like that building a bank with somebody is understanding how well to work together. And what made me think about like kind of bringing that in was your example of you and I working together. Like obviously we have a personal relationship and we have a bank that nobody else really knows about, right? Like no one's been in this marriage for almost 21 years or together for 21 years and can talk to each other that way. But what I've learned, so they don't have all the context. So we have to be careful about that. But what I've learned with you is because you can be conflict avoidant, I need to allow you to get passionate and be okay, and have that be okay. Right. So like, and I'm just also kind of used to people being passionate around me, right? With my Italian mom, but you don't like getting there. So I've learned that you need to feel safe enough to like spit it out, right? Even though like it makes you uncomfortable, you don't want to have that conflict and you'd rather avoid saying the thing that you think is going to be like so explosive it ends up not being. So I think that you kind of got to give people runways too to like say what they need to say and then like have it be okay in the end. So you perceive that explosion. I perceive it as like, oh, good. Now I actually know how he feels. Like, okay, now we can get somewhere, And I think the first time that happened in front of the team, like you raised your voice and I can't even remember what it was. Like you weren't yelling at me, but you were just like you raising your voice and you were passionate about talking about something and like had elevated the intensity, if you will. And it didn't bother me in the least. But seeing that elevated intensity was uncomfortable for the rest of the team because I didn't know that about you, right? Like the 20 years together, I know that like the intensity is going to raise. It's not directed at me. It's directed at the problem. And I've got to let you do that so that you can get to the part where you say what you need to say. And then everything's fine. So I've learned how to not take a lot of conflict personally, like as a personal attack, which I think is really difficult to do when the intensity gets high. The conflict always has to be directed at the problem, not the person. And I think that's what starts establishing the trust between people. And that's the thing you've got to learn with everybody on your team is how do we make it clear that we're attacking a problem and not each other?
Yeah. I think what you said there, like all the way through is so important. Like leadership is not probably for everyone and it's not necessarily natural, right?
Right.
Like everybody wants like, I want a raise and I want a bigger position. Like you got to know that with the role comes responsibilities. And a lot of these responsibilities are not natural. They need to be worked on. Servant leadership, like you said, the reality is the bigger the organization gets, right, there's more people to do different jobs. Like you said, you got the accountant and the salesperson. They have totally different personalities. They're God-given traits and whatever, but they also handle everything different. But your job as the leader is, like you said, not to force. You want them all in your team because they're unique unicorns. All of them are, unique in their own way, and you want that. So you can't stifle that and expect them all to follow certain, guidelines of conflict and conflict resolution. And so that emotional intelligence, I think everybody needs to be reading, emotional intelligence 2.0 and different books about it, crucial conversations. It is not easy. There is volumes of books that are written on this for us to continue to get better. Like everybody needs to be, handled a little bit differently. And it is, like you said, on you, your onus as the leader. I tell myself sometimes that all the time, like it has to be a reminder, like I'm don't want to handle this problem. It's like, but you wanted the position. Mm-hmm. So the problem came along with it. But the problem is just an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that famous quote, smooth seas did not create the skilled sailor. And all of us want to be a skilled sailor. And that means that we have to figure out a way to successfully navigate those seas. They're inevitable. It's going to happen. And this is all people related who also have their childhood and their upbringing and their personal experience. It all leads to how they react to whatever it is that's happening, positive or negative. And I think one of the key things that we need to do as leaders is of course, handle that conflict well. But in the end, it's creating a complementary team of very different people with all those very different experiences and having the wherewithal to help people navigate that alongside of the problem that we're all trying to attack in a revenue positive way. And I think that comes with awareness and also honesty of what is really, really going well and what people are really good at. And then being able to tell them when things don't go the right way, what to do next, or to point out that, hey, you said you were going to do that and you didn't. Why? Because it's all in the overall goal of having a super high performing team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's critical, right? So we've talked about the idea that we need to be clear. Clear as kindness. We cannot avoid conflict. In order to have conflict, you have to have a safe zone. You have to have trust to begin with. And then hitting in this idea of driving home conflict resolution. Okay, that's great. We've created the environment. Now the conflict's here. How do we resolve it? And how do we go through there? There's a good statement that I've heard before. Like sometimes you'll have an argument with somebody and they'll be like, you're right. You're right. And it sounds good. I think Chris Voss talks about this, right? Like you're having a conflict with somebody and they're like, you're right. And you think that you've done something good. Like, sweet. They know I'm right. Let's go. And like, no, they're going to agree with you to move on from the conflict, but they're not going to change anything. They don't believe in it. Versus if they say, that's right. And so you touched on something, the idea of how do I focus that this is about the problem, not about the people. This is not you versus me, and making sure that we're casting the vision of like, we want to go in a direction. What is the right choice? I mean, I've actually sworn in meetings. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Who's right? What's the right decision? Like, I think it was somebody in the team was like, oh, well, this was your idea. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Whose idea is what? It does not matter. Let's throw them all out here and let's figure out what's the right decision to get us the result. Because it's not to make sure that I'm right. I don't care.
I think that's a super interesting, like little tidbit, like a little bit of gold nugget that I want to make sure didn't get glossed over is that Chris Voss quote, when you're talking to somebody and you're coaching them through something and they say, you're right. You want them to say, that's right. So if you hear somebody say that to you, you're right. That's an indicator to you as a leader. It's like, wait a minute. It's not about who's right. It's about doing what's right. So it's such a little subtle hint in a conversation of how you're doing and how you're portraying your point to the person you're talking to. Like you want them to say, that's right. So just I needed to highlight that one more time because I think that's such a powerful little hint on how you're doing and how you're communicating.
Right. Consensus theater. It's all for show. Yeah.
I think we should transition to the question. So the Q&A is tell us about a time you two fundamentally disagreed on a business move and how did you resolve it? And then without naming names, what was the healthiest disagreement that happened in the office this week and how did it improve the final decision?
I don't really have a disagreement. I think I just have disagreement amnesia, which is probably an important thing to have.
I will say that is really important. You got to forget and move on.
I can't. I've forgotten any time I've ever been wrong. I don't know. I can't come up with any.
I can tell you something. No, I'm just kidding. I do think it's important to resolve it and forget it. Do not hold a log of resentment. Do not keep. What's the verse? Do not keep a record of wrongs. Yeah. Right. It's very, very important. Can you tell me about something this week? Because obviously we forget if it happens too far back of a disagreement that you had with a team member, or maybe a difficult conversation that you had to have with a team member in the last week or so. And how did you get to resolution?
I think right now we're struggling with a little bit of transition of like, we continue to push harder and harder with in-person appointments, asking more of the team to go on in-persons, et cetera. We're getting some issues with canceled appointments and those sort of things. And so everybody has an opinion on what needs to get done. And we've got 12 different opinions in there of how it needs to get done. And you continue to kind of push like, this is what you know what's right. So I just want to push these things on you. And so it can become a little bit of a conflict. Like, I'm still getting these cancellations. And so one of the best things, I think, is to be able to create that trusted environment where you can come. And I have to be careful with myself on this, because like, you're coming to me with something that I feel strongly is a wrong answer. And I just want to cut you out, stop talking and just do what I said, damn it, is kind of where you want to come out with a lot of these different things. But creating the space, walking through things, and actually bringing people in. So the frustration of going on appointments and the cancellations and those sort of things. All right, let me bring you in. Let's have an actual, we'll call them like a process day, like have a process moment where it's going to be set aside. So it's not a harried conversation. It's going to be very intentional with a goal of, we have canceled appointments. How can we improve on this? Maybe we can improve on the conversations that are having ahead of time. What's some of the value that you can bring to improve the conversations that were ahead of time? And that's basically what I did. Like, okay, you're frustrated by this. I continue to try to drive this way. You're trying to drive this way. Where can we come to a pass where we can, at the end, not focus on whether it's my idea versus your idea. At the end of the day, we both want attended appointments, period. Now that's the goal. We're not arguing as to whether we're going on an appointment or how that's happening. We're focused on the problem of increasing attended appointments. How do we do that? Let's focus on how they're set. And then we're bringing that into, like I said, the process day where we're re-looking at how appointments are set, on what deals, and what that conversation is to increase the attendance. And stay tuned. We'll see if those changes work.
Okay. So I guess I'll answer the same question. It's time, like this podcast is timely because, like I said, we're in the middle of quarterly planning right now. So there's a lot of review and performance metrics being discussed this week, just naturally, because that's where we're at. And we had a team member this week who pretty severely missed on their goal and was tracking this way all quarter. Like, it's not a surprise to sit in this meeting and hear that we did not hit the goal. And we're, kind of struggling through it all quarter. And like, maybe we'll get closer than we think than we did. And And we get to the end and, we're like halfway where we should have been. And so the team member presented on like what we're going to do next. Right. And it's a long presentation, and there's a lot involved into what to do next. At the leadership level, like it involves multiple people, it involves cross departments, et cetera. And the highlight is it didn't go well. And it's difficult to hear a suggestion or a plan that is not clear. And I have to kind of call out like kind of some of my core values here is like, I strive for clarity at all times. Clarity also means like honesty. Like, you have to honestly say what's happening in order to be clear, and like honestly measure and know a lot of things, like know your numbers and know what the plan is and overall vision in order to create clarity. And I had, this team member who was just not like, it just wasn't a clear plan. And I get very upset by this, right? Like, I have a visceral reaction, and it's difficult for me to be like, okay, I'm going to stay calm. I'm going to hear everybody out, and like, let's see where this is going. Because to your point, like, I want to jump in. I'm a doer. I'm a fixer. I'm a workhorse. I'll come in and like jump in the trenches and just do it. So first things first, I had to like let the whole thing play out and hear the whole plan. And afterward, group environment is not a great place to give criticism. I feel very strongly you don't give significant criticism in front of a group, because it doesn't create trust. It creates a terrible feeling of tension, and you shut somebody down. They're just not going to receive it the way you want them to in a productive way in a group environment, because it's embarrassing. So one-on-one, and had to have a difficult conversation of like, hey, that didn't go well. Like, not only do we not hit our goal, but we don't have clarity on how to hit the goal. And the plan that was presented was not enough. It's not going to work because it's not clear. And we had to like kind of run through that whole that whole discussion, and that, required a team member to be honest and to self-reflect. And we kind of had to go through that whole exercise together of like, okay, no, that wasn't clear. And I don't have clarity, and I didn't have time to formulate a plan. And I'm confused. Like what it comes down to is like the plan wasn't articulate because there wasn't enough time for it to be articulate and didn't have the tools that they needed to be articulate. So difficult position for me because I hate delivering bad news and I hate having tension. But really, really productive because in the end, that whole conversation resulted in, okay, now let's talk about what we're going to do. Let's look at the whole thing together and come up with a plan together. These are some of the ideas that I have. What are some, like, let's take this time because we didn't have time before to solidify it. Let's do it together now. And I think that ended up being extremely productive. And it didn't have to be this like moment where anybody gets mad and upset and loses their temper. Like it just is a moment of tension that people can work towards a problem in. And I think it was a good milestone just for everybody because it shows that tension is okay. And tension and this conflict can be very, very productive if it's done in like a healthy way.
Absolutely.
And like you need tension to grow. Like you lift up heavy weights and it's tension and like that's how your muscle grows. Like it's really the same thing with leadership, and it's so uncomfortable. And I'm uncomfortable and I want to have like my, I don't know, my flesh responds to it and like be upset and like, but if you can, like you keep control of that and like work towards a problem and not your flesh reaction, I think we can get somewhere really productive. So anyway, that like is happening this week, and all this discussion feels very germane right now because it's a constant thing. And so I think kind of my personal lesson and like my personal reminder and a takeaway that I hope listeners get from this is normal.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing and wonderful. And I can't tell you how many times I've been so worried about having a conversation and playing it through my head and building it up to be so much bigger than it is, so much bigger than it needs to be. And almost every time, I mean, there's times where you have to put like a little bit of space in there to allow the emotion to kind of come down. Mm-hmm. Like you said, don't bite people like a rabid dog. But how many times I've been worried about something and the conversation has been so much easier than what I thought it was going to be. And like you said, is so much more productive. I feel very firmly. And I think, we've talked about this in the beginning days of our company of like, I feel like we used to push things underneath the rug to make like today a little bit smoother, and they will come up and bite you in the ass later and you will go out of business. Like it's almost guaranteed. If you cannot learn to address conflict and handle conflict, you will not have a functioning, scaling business.
Yeah, and I think it's important to always circle back that this is about the problem we're trying to solve. This is about our project that we're working on. This is not about the person. It can never be a personal attack. It can never be a personal deficit. It has to always be about what we're doing together, what we're trying to accomplish. And that will create an environment of trust. Just framing it that way and reminding people that is actually what we're doing. Like we're working on this thing together and we need to be able to do that well together.
Yeah. And it's powerful when certain conflict, and I want to use the word maybe tension better, when it happens in front of people. And like you said, people see that it goes well and it didn't end in death. Right. And then sometimes they actually see that there was a positive result and it's an encouragement. I had to learn it from you and your mother. Like, wow, they didn't kill it. I thought for sure they were going to kill each other, and they didn't. And they had an amazing dinner afterwards, like amazing. And so you can bring that with the business too. Like as you address these smaller and smaller conflicts, or, these small conflicts and get through them, like everybody's like, all right, like you said, normalize it into the culture. It's something that you have to bring in. You set the tone as to how things are going to be addressed. You set the tone for the culture. That's your job, right? When they go through like, what's the role and job description? Like you visionaries out there, that's your job, is to set the culture and make sure that other people are following through. So on that,
yeah, I'll just say,
go ahead.
One more thing before we wrap. I think what can help teach the team around you to do that and that it's safe is that if somebody has an emotional reaction, that you don't have an emotional reaction, like that you don't escalate it. And it like, just like I had to learn that with you, like I need to allow you to have an emotional reaction. I don't need to match your emotional reaction. I need to let you have it. And then I know that we're going to come back down to back to the problem. I think the same thing needs to happen in your team that you're building with you and around you, is that it's going to happen. Like, people are going to get passionate about stuff. They're going to have a reaction about stuff. And you can't match that energy when that does happen. It needs to come, you need to allow it to come back down so that it can create that safety. Otherwise, you're just literally just yelling at each other. It's
Right.
okay to have an emotional reaction and then let it simmer and let it come back down to a nadir point where we can move forward.
Sweet. Keep the gloves on. Don't take the gloves off.